On the hour, we're starting live. This is Music Ally TV. I'm Joe Sparrow here in Berlin. Well, it's Friday the 13th. Unlucky for some, but we're very lucky to have three great expert guests joining us this time on Music Ally TV to discuss a very hot topic and extending from some of the conversations we've had all through the year. Well, while we're just waiting for a few more people to arrive as they come through the door, well, this is the topic. What is the state of contracts in 2021? Where do we want to change and take contracts between artists, songwriters, labels, and publishers? What would they look like if they were really what people want in the immediate future? We've got a great panel to discuss this. We've spoken a lot in the last year about how artists and songwriters are rewarded from use of their work. And this show has been sort of initiated a little bit by a statement that the European Music Managers Alliance put out last week, where they demanded immediate change in quite a strongly worded statement that called the current system of copyright ownership and the contractual relationships unfit for purpose, and especially so for artists and songwriters tied to outdated pre-streaming contracts. Now we've got the Patrick, my colleague here in London, you can share the Music Ally link, which describes that more and links to the EMA statement. So what should change in the copyright relationship look like? We're going to discuss that, and we'll also talk about the EU Copyright Directive, in particular directives number 18 to 20, which directly as fans address contract reform. So the panel, I'm very, very pleased to welcome Per Kviman, who's the chair of EMA and head of MMF Sweden, and is a respected manager and at Versity Music. Hi, Per.
Thank you. Yes.
Was that a descriptive enough introduction?
Right. Introduction. Thank you.
Good, no problem. And joining us as well is the vice chair of EMA, head of MMF Finland. It's Virpi Immonen of Full Steam Management. Hi, Virpi.
Hello.
Hi, nice to meet you. And excitingly, I just wanted to drop this bit in that you are the music supervisor for the Moomins. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
That's a dream job right there, isn't it? Fantastic. Good to know. And all the way from Paris, joining us, thrilled to say, Romain Vivien, the MD and board director at Believe, where you're in charge of label activity at Believe Recordings for
label
French
activity and distribution. Yeah, absolutely.
And distribution.
Nice
Hi,
to
thanks
meet
for
you all.
joining us. Yeah, thanks for joining us very much. Looking forward to hearing your perspectives. And last but by no means least, of course, Patrick Ross, or SVP of Digital Strategy at Music Ally, on a boat in London. Hi, Patrick.
Hey, Joe. Thank you very much for having me.
A pleasure. Now, Patrick, not that we've ever been accused of crowbarring into these TV shows any kind of product placement, but if I was interested in short form video strategies, can you recommend a webinar that's taking place soon?
Short form video strategies. Well, I mean, obviously with the rise of things like TikTok, which everyone talks about, but also when we think about things like Instagram Reels and Triller, which, there's been probably less conversation, but possibly more opportunities around. Music Ally does actually happen to have on November 18th, we're doing a webinar. It will be at 5 p.m. UK time, and we're going to be going through short form video strategies across platforms and how to really get the most out of these platforms. We put a lot of research in this. It comes not only from our experience working with artists on these platforms, but also spotting the trends. So if you're interested in finding out more about getting into the short form video strategy area, then let me send over a link right now, and you can sign up by contacting Anthony, and I'll put that in the chat right now.
Okay, put that in the chat. So if you're interested in short form video strategies and learning more, contact Anthony at musically.com, and I promise that will be the last product placement in the show. Okay, so let's get on to the main topic. Don't forget, you can ask questions about anything being discussed around how you feel about artist and songwriter contracts, what you think artist and songwriter contracts should be like in a modern music industry. Hit the Q&A button at the bottom, get your questions in early. You can ask our experts, and we will get as many of those questions in front of them as possible during this conversation. Now, the issue of remuneration of artists has been loud and clear this year. And people have been talking about a lot, in particular, the money coming from streaming to artists, but the issue beneath that is contractual. it stands to reason that the dynamics between artists and songwriters and labels and publishers may also be changing in this time. And obviously there was this statement from the European Music Managers Alliance last week. And it's important to note that that was addressing labels and collecting societies in its statement, rather than attacking streaming services directly, where a lot of the attention has been focused. Now, as well as Emma's statement, there have been high-profile examples of discussion around contracts, including Kanye West famously tweeting out every page of his labyrinthine contracts, which was fascinating to contract nerds. And BMG recently removed controlled composition clauses from historic contracts of theirs. And meanwhile, of course, as I said, the EU Copyright Directive will have an impact on contracts and rights reversions. There's lots to discuss, so let's see what we can do in the remaining 55 minutes. Let's start with our chair and vice chair from the European Music Managers Alliance, Per and Virpi. Why was this? This is a strong statement. There's a link to it in the chat if you're just joining us. I'll perhaps drop it in there again in case you can't see it. But why did you publish this statement, and what are you trying to? What conversation are you trying to start here?
Well, I think the initiative that's been going on for quite a few years now from the European Union with the Copyright Directive is a very important one, and the implementation of these articles is going to happen by June. And to underline what we're talking about with legacy contract and I would say contract that are mostly of them that have more than 5 years, 5 to 10 years, it's not relevant in most cases to today's how streaming and the digital the revenues are going from right holders to artists. So that's one thing we wanted to put the light on, or to really start this discussion before the implementation is done. And another thing when we're talking about new contract is I think it's the transparency needs to be taken much more seriously. The bulk payments from the big tech companies like Facebook going into to especially the majors, but also bigger independents, it's not transparent at all, I would say, and that large sum of money will only grow in the future. And it's very important we start to have a real insight in how this money is distributed.
Yeah, Virpi, when you deal with artists and they, obviously the issue here is about historic contracts and the changes, how a new contract could be made that is sort of more reflective of the current era of how money is generated for songwriters and artists. When you talk to songwriters and artists, is there sort of a clear number one frustration or criticism they have of their contractual agreements?
I can't say that there's clear number one, but obviously now when there's no live music, the whole recording industry has actually became so much more important for all the artists, but also because we have so many options nowadays. There's so many ways artists can work independently. There's new way of thinking. There's new way of consuming. There's basically, the world is kind of like changed. We have like the whole industry, and the music industry especially has changed over the past 10 years, but the agreements haven't. We are still kind of like stuck in I don't know where, 2008, 10, somewhere there. But I guess it's one of the main things what we are talking nowadays, especially with new upcoming artists, is the different ways of releasing your music. There's so many options, and what is the best way, and like depending on the genre and the artist, of course, there's so much, like so many ways to do things nowadays.
Yeah, and that's something we can discuss in a bit, which is are newer artists possibly inclined to not sign label contracts or those kind of contracts in order to retain control and perhaps maybe there's things they're missing out on because of that, but we can talk about that shortly. Let's jump over to Paris, Romain. You were not involved in that statement from Emma, of course, but you oversee, amongst other things, as you said, label activity, I believe. What are your feelings in general, from your perspective, on these calls for contractual change?
Well, I think they're really good, and I think it's really good that you guys are putting that together. I've read the statement, and I think it goes across many very important issues and matter. I think the transparency is probably the most critical one, because we have to be in a much more transparency world. And I think no matter what the deal is, at the end of the day, both parties that are signing a contract need to be fully aware and fully informed about what they are signing and how that deal is going to work and what type of revenue they're going to get, etc., etc. And this is really the core DNA, one of the 2 or 3 biggest and strongest DNA of Believe since the beginning. And we always try to be as transparent as possible, from the contract we are putting on the table to the data and the revenue and the backstage and the tools we are providing to all our artists across the world, for them to be fully transparent about what they are signing, what they're going to get against the services in one contract or another. We have various types of contract that we use at Believe, from being a producer to being a pure distribution to being a distributor plus services or co-exploitation deal, GV and stuff like that. So no matter what the deal is, what matters is what you're going to get in terms of level of services and in terms of value sharing within your contract. So that's what we need to put together the right way. That's how we need, and that's what we are, what is due to the artist or the producers. So they need to know exactly what's going to happen with their revenue, with their content, with their rights. Obviously, we are more and more going into a world, and the artists willing to keep their copyrights and their ownerships, which I think is good. Our label activity at Believe is very, very small. The vast majority of our business is distribution, meaning all the artists and the label that we are working with are their own producer, and they keep their royalty. I mean, they keep their ownership. And they get a fair share of the royalty on the revenue we are developing. So I think transparency is fundamental, and I think transparency also need to work better and better with the DSPs. I think we are fighting a lot, and I was actually on a call with one member of the cultural minister of Paris an hour ago, and he was asking me, what do you need from us? How can we help you in that digital world? And the first thing that came up to my mind, and I told him, I said, well, we need you to help us to have more transparency from the DSP on the way their algorithms are working. So all this transparency question needs to work both ways. It needs to work between us, distributor, producer, part of the musical ecosystem, and the DSPs and the platforms, and then it needs to work between us and the artists we represent, the producers, the managers. So I think it's a fair question. I think the value needs to be shared differently than it used to. Why? Because I think the artists are bringing much more, for some of them, and many of them are bringing much more on the table than they used to bring before. Why? Because they don't necessarily need a producer anymore. Why? Because they can address and develop an audience by themselves through the social networks, which they couldn't do earlier. And they were always going through a filter of a media or a record company. Now they can address their audience directly. So what they bring on the table, that these connections with the audience, it's huge. It's a big value. It's a lot of data. It's a lot of information. It's a capacity to address an audience, to sell music, to sell tickets, to sell merchandising. So that's what we need to do. So I think this is a fair statement. In the EU regulation, I think the other thing that needs to be put on top of the share, the revenue share, is the transparency and the responsibility for those guys to explain how they work, and so at least they have all the tools in place so they can monitor those rights on any content they are distributing online.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I think transparency is a clear request, a clear desire from probably, well, all corners of the music industry, really, isn't it? And when Per and Virpi, you were calling for these changes, if you boil it down, really transparency, as Romain was saying, is really the key issue here. I just want to talk about, there were 4 key demands in the Emma statement, and I'd like to talk about in general that as a sort of frame for the wider conversation, the first 2. The first part was talking about a new contract between artists and major music corporations. Now, just for clarity on this, Per, perhaps you can start us off. When you were talking about, these are desires, these desires for 4 changes are being voiced by the European Music Managers Alliance, sort of on behalf of the artists and songwriters you represent. So this is the culmination of the thoughts of all these creators and performers in Europe, in that sense. So when you are saying a new contract between artists and major music corporations, is transparency a key part of that, or is it a stripping out of old ideas that are no longer useful, or is it all of these things?
I'd say when we're talking about new contract, transparency is definitely number one. And as I mentioned earlier, the big, for instance, the big bulk payments coming in from Facebook and TikTok and others that needs much greater transparency. There is no transparency, I would say, about these payments. And
what sort of transparency would you like to see? How would you like that to be more clear?
Well, they need to work. I don't think it's good enough that they just get a big chunk of money for Facebook using music, and then they sort of split it out. If they share it with the artists, they do it on their own. There's no real. I think from what I know, there's no contract that really regulate how that money is supposed to be fed to the artist. And I think that I want to point out that you mentioned that we didn't mention or that DSP was not in the act statement, and the reason for that is that we want to focus on these 4 points. Doesn't mean that we don't have criticism or will have argues for how DSPs need to develop. And fraud and manipulated streams is something that is a grave problem. A grave problem. I think the German group of managers that are looking at this is estimating it could be 10 to 20% of all streams, and that's money that's going in the wrong hands to start with. It's also money that can be in organized crime, laundry of money. Extremely important that the DSPs start to work on really stopping this or not feeding it that some believe they are. But that also comes down in the relationship and the transparency between the DSP and the label. I mean, I think Daniel Ek and Martin, when they started Spotify, did an absolutely amazing, I mean, it's in a way unbelievable what they succeeded with. And it's been a great saver for the music industry. The record companies themselves couldn't work it out. They were, what was going on around the millennium shift was just going nowhere until Spotify actually got their business started. So a lot to I think we have a lot to share them for, but it's also time to develop their business model. Is 2020 now, they started in 2008.
I mean, that was an interesting thing. Thanks, Per. That's great. Virpi, this is what you were saying, that the contracts and the agreements and the understanding and the system and the kind of expectations around the contractual agreements and sort of understanding where money goes are perhaps, as you said earlier, are stuck in 2008, just around the time that streaming was getting on its feet.
But there's still so outdated business models, and we still use a lot of reductions and debts, and we kind of use old world business practices.
That's what I was going to ask you, which is why is this happening? What is the motivation to keep using old contracts, old models, old practices in a time of complete digital change?
I believe it generates more money to the right owners. I think that's the key to it, because obviously when you have a lot of reductions and low royalty rates, and like you based on your business model on physical sales, and now we are on digital era, it creates so much more money for the right owners.
And there's a strange sort of irony there, isn't there? Because the music business was the first to be, or of the major sort of media businesses, the first to be disrupted by being able to stream the content. You know, it was ahead of video and TV, for instance.
Yes.
And do you think I'll come to you, Romain, in a minute and ask you something similar, but what do you think it would take to, if artists are calling for transparency and change, and you're suggesting it might not be happening for reasons of convenience, what will it take for change to actually start to happen beyond the sort of pressure you're putting on as Emma?
Obviously, there's EU and new laws could be the one way to do it, but I think it comes from the artist side. I believe that because artists have so many ways nowadays, like I said, to release and license and do stuff. So I think that they will start voting with their feet, and they will start doing things differently. They know, and there's kind of like much more awareness nowadays as well.
Yes.
They are so much more aware of their revenues and like where all the money is coming from, and like a lot of artists also understand what it means to own your rights. And I think it's coming, hopefully it's coming from that side.
And fans are starting to understand that as well. Fans are starting to understand where the money goes or where it doesn't go. And
I think that's a big change as well, that nowadays artists and fans are really understanding how this business works. It's kind of like fairness and awareness.
I was going to say that within an awareness perspective, I do a lot of lecturing around various universities, and especially with a lot of young musicians. And it has been pleasantly surprising, I would say, over the last few years of how many of them have it that I want to own my own masters. I know that. They're sometimes not completely sure why, but they're pretty sure that that's something that they need to do, and they fight for it from day one. And that's like, I think, a really encouraging change that hopefully this education aspect is actually helping to change at the artist level.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. Romain, when we talk about new ways of artists interacting with the world, getting their music out there, finding the services that labels have traditionally offered, Believe is one of those examples, right? That's how artists and performers and songwriters can connect. When you in some ways, you were saying you offer the kind of transparency they're looking for. Do you think that when we talk about contracts needing to change, if enough artists start shifting towards working with people like you and not signing contracts, do you think it's that almost sort of capitalist push, so that if it flows down the path of least resistance, so that change will happen when enough artists shift to doing things outside of that system?
Yeah, I think it's two things. Exactly as Virpi has said, I think it has to come from the artist and the artist community overall. So the artists, their managers, an artist is very often, I mean, most of the time with someone else, dealing with his business. So his publisher, his manager, his producer, his lawyer. I think the artist community overall, with all those actors, needs to realize that. So they need to push for more transparency and to push for different type of contract. So I think it comes from that, and then it comes from the market to realize that they have to change their perspective on how to serve the artists better. And I think the reason why we can do that and give away a much bigger share of the revenue with all the transparency to the artist is really coming from two things. First, this is, again, the spirit on which we build the company. But second is the technology. You really have to understand how technology is important for that, because The fact that we are having a sustainable and businesses in distribution, dealing with hundreds of thousands of artists and millions of content over the world, is because we build a technology to be able to address this from a technical, from a logistic, from a financial, from a distribution standpoint. The fact that the record company can't really sustain such business and are still fighting to get a bigger share of the revenue and or putting some silly clauses in their contract. When I'm talking silly clauses, is still to have some royalty, how do you say, royalty breaks in their contract for manufacturing, or royalty break for digital exploitation. This is nonsense. This is nonsense. It doesn't have to be this way. And the reason why we can do it is also because we build a technology that allows us to distribute music at a cheaper price and to report to the artist with all the transparency on a daily basis what's happening on his content, on this track, in which playlist, in which country, on this DSP and another. So it comes from technology. So and the technology leverages a lot of things. It leverages transparency, it leverages margin, it leverages capacity of distributing a lot of content. So that's why we're capable of dealing with so many artists at so many different levels of their development. Again, our purpose is to be able to service as best as we can, with all the transparency and the right level of expertise and services, every artist in any given music genre, in any given country, at every stage of its development. So, and that is sustainable because of the technology, and this is sustainable because we are dealing with different type of business models.
Yeah.
The majors basically have only one business models, which for most of the reasons we just discussed are not really anymore adapted to the way the revenue should be shared, the way the content should be distributed, the way the content should be monetized, the way the audience should be developed, the way we should leverage those audiences, etc. And again, the way the artists are dealing with a lot of stuff they were not dealing before. So lots of them can produce music without a major deal. Yeah. And then they are looking for distribution, they're looking for services, they're looking for marketing. And it has to come, all of those services has to come with a fair price and a balanced one. So this is how I would do it. I mean, and so we can do that because of technology, and the artist has to empower themselves. A lot more, and I think the lawyers and their manager needs to help them doing so.
Well, a good point. Thanks, Romain. And I'll just raise one more point, and then I see we've got lots of questions coming in. So Patrick, we'll come to you shortly with some questions. Per, on that front about artists being given advice and guidance in this process, obviously there's extra pressure on managers at this point then to be that guide, to say, okay, this is the kind of contractual route you should take. You should not sign this contract. You should engage with these companies and do it yourself. Is that are artists generally receptive to trying these newer routes because they're aware of this? Two parts to this question then. Are artists coming to you and saying, find me a better deal than these traditional contracts? And the second part is, what do you do with artists who have got long-standing contracts, perhaps signed before streaming?
Well, on your first question, yeah, definitely yes. I mean, most artists as management are looking for new type of deals. I mean, companies like also besides Believe, BMG and Cobalt has been where you have sort of revised royalty, where it puts a lot of where the main proportion of royalty or income goes to the artist, but it also puts a lot of pressure on the management. It's more, in many ways, the management is supposed to do the labor work, but that's also one very important point from what's happened with the shift to streaming, is that I would say that labels, and especially say what you might call boutique labels or the smaller labels, that you have the main Universal or Warner, but under there you have the tons of smaller labels who find the new talent and could develop it. You don't really see that in the same way these days, I would say, and the labels are not the backbone of for the artist's career anymore. It much more comes from themselves or with management, and this is also why it's so important for the whole ecosystem of the music industry to have another balance of catalog money. I don't think it's even good for the people working at major companies or bigger labels, including bigger indies, to have their source of income coming from catalog, where you basically don't need to do anything more than just collect the money. It's not creative. It's not good for anyone, I would say. So that's why it's so important that this shift is happening. I know one of the majors with the contracts from pre Spotify, the average royalty is 11% to the artist, and they lost their net income from a stream has gone up with 50 to 130%. So, and it's not being shared with the artists. I guess that's why we have the EU directive, because labels wouldn't move.
Right. Virpi, just sort of come to you on this point. You must be dealing with artists who perhaps are on historic contracts. What maybe you are. What are they saying? If they're looking at the amount of money coming in and they're saying, well, I'm on this contract, which means I only get 11%. I think I deserve more than that in this new environment. What can you say to them?
That's the thing. Like, what can you say? Basically, you have to start conversation with the label. Like, but it's basically, we can discuss, we can try to change things. I know that Musicians Union here here in Finland, they've been working on this kind of like fairness clause, that if you have like really old and outdated agreements, there's kind of like this sort of like fairness clause that labels need to at least look at them, and discuss about it. And I know that they have managed to get like few agreements redone, but when you have signed something, it's all about the discussion then and negotiation, like, and how both parties will see it. We know that it's not fair, but
I mean, this is a difficult question, but how likely, how do you think that the big players in this space, I'm not just talking about labels, but other people who have signed these, other major parties who've signed contracts, how do you think they're going to react if a big enough noise starts getting made around wanting to go back and revise historically signed contracts?
I think it actually comes down to the markets. Like, it's easy for me to speak here because Finland and Scandinavia is such a small market comparing to the big music markets. Like, for me, it's so much easier to go and sit down with them and speak with them and maybe even start negotiating with them than I would imagine in the UK, or especially in the States, when you have like such a huge music market. What are you dealing with? So I think it's kind of like, it's also we need to remember like where are we coming from and which markets we are in, because I'm dealing differently than you guys in the UK are dealing.
Yeah. Well, before we go to Patrick for questions, let's go to Romain, who's in one of the bigger music markets. Now, I know that you don't deal with in this particular area necessarily, but you're dealing with artists who perhaps in the past have had historic contracts that they've signed, and then they've signed some sort of deal with Believe, for instance, and they must be pleased with the percentages they're getting. What do you think for example, in France, with the major players in France, what do you think it will take for them to react to these kind of calls for change on historic contracts?
It would change a lot. It would need them to really see distribution as a business, to really invest into technology, to change some of their internal expertise. You have to understand, and I'm not criticizing here because I spent half of my career with a major company from 95 to 2008 before joining Believe. So, and I've learned my classes there, but it's just that they are not organized to address the business as we are, because their contract, their people, their technology is kind of late on some of those issues. And also, I think they're very strong because of their catalog. They're very strong because of their pop acts and their worldwide pop acts. So they're focusing on this, while we are focusing on independent artists, on developing artists, on niche music from every single genre, from classical music to metal. We bought Naive Records, classical, with a huge classical repertoire. We bought Nuclear Blast in Germany for metal. We bought TuneCore in the US, because you were mentioning earlier that it's about dealing with artists. But again, my answer to that was we want to deal with every artist at every stage. And there's a lot of solution, as I think Virpi was saying earlier, for artists to become their own boss, to become their own, their own producers in terms of distribution. So TuneCore is one. And you probably seen a few days ago the announcement of Russ, which is one of our biggest artists, urban artists in the US. And he, in a lot of transparency, again, because transparency should come from every player in the game, he said, well, this is what I'm earning as an artist through TuneCore with my streaming revenue, which is huge amount of money. So this is where I think we should stand. So the majors, they have to understand that. They have to reorganize themselves so they can probably give a higher share to the artist with more transparency. And that goes along. Transparency will always, it's willing to do it, but it's also being capable of doing it. And again, being capable of doing it across so many artists in the world has to go from technology. So they have to make the investment. That's a huge investment. This is millions that we invested over the past 15 years. So it's willing to do it and putting the money in the right place to be able to deal with it.
Do you think that there's, by the way, Patrick has very helpfully shared the details of that story about Russ that you just mentioned, Romain, in the chat. And it is fascinating. He tweeted his weekly earnings, didn't he? And it's a fascinatingly large amount of money. Do you think, Romain, that you were saying about the strength, and we'll come to Patrick with questions in a minute. Do you think that the strength of, as you said, majors being catalog and major international pop acts, do you think that there's a sort of danger or a likelihood that their parameters will close in so that they're only focusing on these large current pop acts and catalog and leave the rest of the market to people like you?
I don't think so. That would be a huge mistake, because the catalog of tomorrow is the newcomers of today. So I think what they are dealing very well, and you all seen, like, even with the crisis, they announced their media numbers and they were all going very up again, thanks to streaming increase and new subscribers coming on board. And we've seen, with Spotify and others, that the good thing about is there's one good thing, because obviously there's so many bad things, but there's one good thing about the crisis, is that this is going to accelerate the transition between physical to digital. This is going to accelerate the type of subscribers that's going to come on those subscription models. And this is going to help to diversify the type of music we're going to consume on those platforms. And it's not going to be only about urban music or dance music. It's going to be about every other music soon enough on those platforms, which is a good thing. So going back to the majors, I think if they're focusing only, catalog and international pop, it's what makes them profitable. And it's what makes them very profitable and having some great market share. So leveraging that market share to get good deals on the platforms because of the numbers they represent. But if they stop investing into newcomers, then they're gonna create less value in the future. So I think they're gonna do, but they have to do it in diversity. I don't think they do it in diversity enough. If you look in France, for example, to answer your questions, majors are controlling probably 2/3 of the market share, but they only represent 1/3 of the new production that is made every year. 2/3 of that new production is thanks to the independent. And most of the, I mean, not most, but some of those independent artists or labels, because they are still distributed by majors, that market share is aggregated into the majors one. But at the end of the day, this is not their own market share, because they are distributing some of those big artists. And in France, the biggest sellers of the past 2 years, Angèle, self-produce, own producers. She's on a distribution deal with Universal. She sold 1 million records. Her market share goes into Universal, but they're only distributing her. Right. And that's one example among many, many others.
Right. Thanks, Romain. That's great. Patrick, we've had a bunch of questions come in. Perhaps you'd like to throw one of them or a couple of them at the panel.
Sure. And just one sort of comment within here as well. I mean, especially looking at Russ and looking at a lot of artists, and understanding that the major ecosystem and the ability to distribute yourself often go part and parcel. So I think we have to sometimes look at this maybe a little more holistically. At sometimes we like to throw the tomatoes sometimes at the large companies that are able to invest, and of course there's those deals. But to go back onto those deals, one of the questions we've had in here for a little while, we've obviously talked about managers, we've talked about artists being aware. How much responsibility lies in lawyers? Because obviously a lawyer is probably one of the first people that an artist needs to get onto their team. And the question actually goes that the lawyers are sort of invested in the label and publisher culture, the sort of traditional industry that we find ourselves in. And how much is it for them to actually challenge these things and actually make these changes, or do they just sort of debate for the artist, or in the sense of what already is and can't really rock the boat too much? Does anyone have any thoughts on how lawyers play it?
Who wants to pick a fight with lawyers?
Yeah, no, well, I think they have a major role, and I was telling that earlier. I think they have a major role, and I think that changes a lot. When we started Believe, most of the lawyers I used to work when I was at Virgin EMI, they were still in the standard record label / major type of deal. Less and less of them are into this, and I think they're following also what's happening in the market. They're dealing with those new deals. They are also seeing the value of having a different type of deals. And we've seen, the lawyers and the level of Euro lawyers that we are dealing with I believe, for distribution, that has changed a lot over the past 5 to 6 years. And I think more and more they're aware of those new offers, they're aware of those new services, they're aware of those new contracts, and they're helping the artists to understand those better. To understand when the value sits, where the share of the revenue sits, what are their responsibility against that? Because obviously, you have to understand that if you go into a distribution deal, there's so much more the artist is responsible for. He needs to be able to produce music. He needs to be able to organize himself. He needs to be able to deal with marketing, to decide the investment, to build his own company, because we don't sign with artists direct. I mean, we do a little bit, but most of our clients are companies, so they need to build their own company. So they have suddenly a lot more responsibility than they used to have before. And I think from that standpoint, lawyers and managers have a critical role to play, because artists can't deal with all those subjects. They need to concentrate. They need to be aware. They need to be fully informed, and they need to choose knowing what they are going for. But they need to first concentrate on what they're good at and making the best songs as possible. And that's where managers and lawyers are so critical. And I'll give you one thing. It's a criteria for us to sign artists. One of the criteria we look at is how strong their environment, their professional environment, managers, lawyers, publishers are. And the better, the better. I mean, and that's something we're looking at.
Yeah. Well, let's thanks, Romain. That's a really good insight. Let's talk to some to managers then. In that case, Per and Virpi, how do you see that in terms of you have this critical role of making a really important decision that you might not be able to undo and then may have decades of consequences. How do you navigate that in a very fast-paced, changing world?
I think you have to be very updated of like what's going on in the business and in the world, and obviously networks help things like Emma obviously will help because we can share so much information to each other. I think for me, at least, it's really kind of like keeping myself up to date and listen and learn and hear what's going on and like what options we have on the table and where this world is going. Because how could I advise someone else if I don't know where we are standing? And that's the big responsibility what I'm carrying.
Do you feel that artists, I've seen a couple of people mentioning this in passing in the chat. Do you think that artists have still, the historic idea was artists felt pressured to sign contracts, whether they were good or not, because it was their only window of opportunity into the music industry? And do you still think that that is something they feel even now in 2020?
I don't think so. It totally obviously depends on the artists and the history and everything, but like especially with new upcoming names, I don't think so.
No. Per?
No, I don't think so either. And you're saying to make a decision that might impact for the artist for 8 to 10 years, how we deal with that. Well, that could be, even worse before, when you sign a 5 to 7 album deal with a major, and if you sign with the wrong company, then you really put yourself and an artist in a bad place. But so I don't think the pressure in that sense is any higher, but the workload is definitely much more pressure from and how all-rounded we need to be. And when it comes working to lawyers, I think in a way the contracts these days are license contracts, these crazy contracts of 100 plus pages. I don't see them very often at all, at least for my part, and I think that they're going shrinking down to more like 10 pages. So the law, if you're engaging a lawyer, only do it if they really have to add something to your business equation. I mean, they for sure know how to charge you.
One of the things that sort of came up earlier was this idea of, like label services deals. And I've had personal experience with a manager who was working with, let's say, a heritage established act. So they had a lot of offers, which I think is something we also need to bear in mind, that artists that are established certainly have more deals available to them because of track record. But a manager signed to a label services deal, and then within a few weeks sort of started kicking the label services company, going, "You're the label." And the label services company had to turn around and go, "No, we're not. You're the label. We provide label services." And the manager went, "Oh, no." So I was thinking it was really good they were getting a 70-30 split. But at the end of the day, I think, as was mentioned, there's so much more work actually put on them. And, to that of, obviously, there are these other deals, but they come with a different level of service and a different level of what's going to be provided if you're going to be getting that larger piece of the pie. Is that part of this conversation as well?
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So it has to.
It's important that the artists understand that they are working with a label service and what the management responsibility and their own responsibility, how that shift when you do this type of deals. And some artists, I guess, it's better than others to take that in or to understand that. But that is a crucial point to be aware of when you work that way.
And I also think that the way, kind of like the working practices and working ethics has changed so much over the past 10 years from the artist side as well. Like I said, like the whole awareness of things and like how they know how to make music and release it and like how to market it. Like we have so much more tools to make things happen without any big companies behind them. So things have changed dramatically.
And your roles, obviously, as managers has changed in a revolutionary way as well. We've got 10 minutes left, and I want to quickly. 10 minutes is not enough time to discuss the EU copyright directives, but let's have a go. There's two in particular which could be key in this discussion, which has a major impact on the power balance between artists and rights holders that deal with contractual reforms for authors and creators, and as well as rights reversion mechanisms. Article 19, we talked about transparency. Article 19 of the Copyright Directive requires a contracting party to provide up-to-date and relevant comprehensive information to authors and performers on how their work's being used. Do you feel that there's a lot to discuss here, but do you feel that that transparency directive is going to have a major impact on how artists and are aware of where their money's coming from and how? Perhaps we'll start with Romain for this one.
If they are aware of, if they need to be more aware of from where the money is coming from, that's the question.
Yeah, do you think that the new article, the copyright directives that are going to come in, Article 19 is around transparency. Do you think that it will make the change that it's intended to?
I hope so. I really hope so. I'm not sure, although I'm not sure how they're gonna be able to verify into the implementation and everything else. But I really hope so. Again, anything that could make the relationship fairer and more transparent between the artist and their producer or distributor is a good thing. And again, that's not only between us somehow in the case of Believe in our artists, but that's also between us and the platforms. So yeah, I really hope so. But again, I'm not sure how they will. Is there any system? I'm not very clear about how they will actually implement and verify all those
well,
things.
one complication of this is well, one complication is that the EU member states individually have sort of the ability to limit the scope of how this works and the obligations of it. Virpi, we're all sort of having to become a little bit of some level of expertise, not only when you're a manager of understanding how to become a help with label services and things, but also understanding complicated things like copyright directives. What do you feel about this? Do you think that these copyright directives that are talking about making more transparent, enforcing transparency, do you think this will actually happen? And what changes could follow? Well,
this is just like Romain said, like that. We hope so. We definitely hope so, but like, who knows yet? I think that no one has like the right answer to it yet. That does it actually bring the transparency? I hope it will actually like gain more power to authors and performers, and like, to continue like giving more like economic value of their rights.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that we've talked about, and Romain in particular has talked about, is new technology and providing new technology and embracing it and using it because it's what people and the industry is demanding. And one thing that this directive might require major labels, major publishers, and other major industries to do is provide, I think the wording is, comprehensive information about the exploitation of works. Do you think, Virpi, that these major businesses are technologically prepared, or maybe prepared in a sort of broader sense to share this kind of detailed information?
I guess they have to. This is coming, like, is it next summer when they're actually implementing?
Yeah, very soon.
Yeah, very soon. But this has been on the table for so long time now, and there's been so many debates and like so many discussions about this. So they have to be prepared. There's like.
Per, I think it's about will. I mean, these companies definitely have the resources to do so if they put their effort into it, and this is why it's so important, and also why we started this discussion, why we're coming with this statement now. The EU directive, it's in a way up to all of us to make sure and put pressure on that it's implemented in a way where it's not watered down and really make a difference. That's Article 18 and 20 is extremely important as well. And we of course are our main thing as management is that the income from especially catalogs should be more fairly split between rights holders and artists, but at the same time we definitely back Article 17, and that there should be proper licenses between right holders and digital platforms.
What do you think? What do you feel about, as you represent the artists? You're saying you're looking for a better split. What do you think about the idea that, for example, Article 17, and we're not talking about that specifically, but we're talking about this group of directives that might actually put a sort of cooling effect on the use of copyrighted materials? You know, it will sort of, the moment it's the argument for not having these directives is, well, without these directives, we can make massive technological innovation and sort the problems out with copyright later. But if we have to do it first, we don't get the innovation which makes more money. That's the counter argument. We've talked about technology a lot. Is that not true? Do you think that do you think it might have an effect where it slows things down?
I think it's not really true that it will slow things down. I think it's an argument you're making. Again, it's down to will. These companies, they have the resources to deal with it and to solve it. But also, this is not only the directive is not only about the music industry, but I think the music industry have showed throughout the years that we are able to bring on new ways of distribution and communication, and we always solved it. I can't see that we won't do it this time either. Also, sorry.
Yeah, no, I totally understand that. Romain, you've talked about technology a lot. What do you think?
Well, I'll give you an example. I totally agree with Spirit. It's a question of will, and I think if they don't organize themselves, that's going to be a problem, and they're going to lose more business. I'll give you one example. If you take YouTube, they invested, because this is also part of the UE regulation and new law. It's that all the platform needs to have some sort of a system called Content ID when it comes to YouTube, about making the tracking and the right holders on every piece of content to be protected and monetized to the right holders on every platforms. And this is Content ID when it comes to YouTube, and this is a fantastic tool that allow everyone to know where their content stands, to monetize them, and to decide the policy of monetization they want to have. We are the second biggest partner of YouTube worldwide, and this is representing almost 20% of our revenue, which is 3 or 4 times what that represents with the majors. Why? Because the majors not working with that platforms well enough, because they didn't organize the technology, and they are not putting the expertise, and they are not dealing with those right properly. And when I say that, I'll give you one example, is that everyone's distributing music everywhere. Sometimes you have license and sub-license, and sometimes you are claiming rights worldwide, and you don't have worldwide right, but you just forgot to put that in the policy of the content you send to the platform. You are claiming monetization everywhere, where you should claim monetization everywhere except the US, for example. And with that type of cases, with the producers, the distributor, and the publishers, and the right owners, it's hundreds of thousands of cases on the table every month. And we are tracking all those ones with people dedicated to that, just to make sure we get the right things on our content to be monetized. And it's been years and years that we are fighting with the majors just to have them to look at those lists, to answer our claim, to put people facing those ones, to release the ones where they don't have ownerships, and vice versa, because it needs to work both ways. And the list is like thousands of lines on our Excel spreadsheet and our tools and everything. Because why? Because they just don't answer.
Why don't they? Why don't
that
they
represent just because they don't give a shit, and because they didn't have the technology, or they don't put the resources and the people dealing with that, because that requires technology and that requires people to take care of that, and they just don't.
And why do we think that this is an accusation? We hear sometimes that this technology and the moving of resources to this technological part of the music industry has not happened in some places. Why do you think, Romain, that in your opinion, that hasn't happened fast enough there?
I think because they don't want to dedicate resources, so investment and money to that, and they prefer invest in whatever, like giving huge advances to sign artists, to buy companies, to be careful about the EBITDA, because most of them are public companies. Lots of reasons, but definitely they're not putting the resources to deal with those issues.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Romain. Fascinating stuff, and a few people agreeing with you in the chat there. So you've struck a nerve there, which is interesting. So before we wrap things up, we've talked about transparency and increased desire for increased transparency from all sides. We've talked about pressure coming from managers, people representing artists themselves, and maybe even the public pushing for change. And we talked in quite interesting detail there about the technology needed to actually make this change happen. What I'd like to do before we finish is just quickly go around the panel and sort of we've talked about the hopes and desires for change. And what I want to know from each of you is how do you feel about the how do you think it will happen? And if so, what will the first step be? And Virpi, I'm going to throw this to you initially. So what kind of change do you think will happen, and what might be the first thing to change?
I think I said it already before, that I think that this fairness and awareness is rising, and comes from the artists. I think that I'm saying that a lot of majors are actually focusing on only certain genres, like mainstream pop and rap and hip hop mainly. And I think that that artists from different genres and niches and also from mainstream are finding new ways of releasing.
Right. Great, thanks, Virpi. And Per, same to you. Just quickly, what's your how confident you feel the change is coming that you're asking for?
I'm confident. In history, you come to tipping points, and I think you're going to come to tipping points with all these. When artists and management as a group start to really put pressure on this, it's gonna like taking down the Berlin Wall. All of a sudden, it happens. It's and with the techniques you have these days, and how quick things are turning, I'm confident change will come in a not too long future.
Right. Thanks very much, Per. And again, Romain, quickly, do you think that we are at a tipping point where change is happening?
Well, I definitely think that we are on the edge of having those changes to be implemented. Yes, because the more the revenue from the artists will come from digital, the more those issues will be important for the artist community. And none of us, independent or majors, are nothing without the artists. So if this is becoming a huge issue, and if they see they are losing confidence with their artists, losing contracts, etc., yes, I think they will have to change. And I think again, the more the income is going to come from digital, the more probably they're going to invest, and everyone needs to invest in this technology to address this, because it's so different from the physical business.
Right. So a good share of advice there, and a warning over technology as ever, which is great. So thank you, Romain. So that's been it. We've covered a lot of ground there, more than I thought we would, and I'm very grateful for everyone joining us. There will be more information that you can check out about this on Music Ally, of course. And Patrick, I think you've already shared in the chat some interesting links and information about being able to sign up for various free resources from Music Ally to investigate this further. And there will hopefully be a recording of this online in a day or two, YouTube, and we'll announce that when it happens. Thank you very much, all of you, for joining us. That's Per and Virpi from the European Music Managers Alliance. Thank you both very much for joining us from Sweden and Finland. And hope to see you again soon. And Romain, for joining us from Paris. Romain, MD and board member at Believe. Thank you very much for your input. Very grateful to have you all. And Patrick, as ever, thanks for joining us from a boat in London.
Thank you, Joe.
Always a pleasure, never a chore. And that's it for today on Music Ally TV. Hope to see you again soon. But for now, from me in Berlin and from everyone here,